This is All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. In 1992, China officially opened its doors to international adoptions. Many of those adopted children ended up right here in New York City. The New York Times Magazine even ran a cover story about it in 1993. American parents were told that these babies were unwanted girls, a result of China's one-child policy. Often Chinese families might abandon their daughters in favor of trying for a son. One of those adoptive American parents was told that her daughter Esther, once called Fang Fang, was one of these discarded girls. Journalist Barbara Demick soon uncovered that Esther was actually abducted from her birth family. She was taken as a toddler by the Chinese State Family Planning Commission, brought to an orphanage, and eventually adopted. Her parents, two older siblings, and a twin sister remained in China. Esther is far from the only adopted child who was taken by the government. In Barbara Demick's new book, she tells the story of Esther, her birth family, and the underside of adoption from China. It's titled Daughters of the Bamboo Grove, From China to America, a true story of abduction, adoption, and separated twins. When Barbara joined us on All of It, I started by asking her to share the background of China's one-child policy, why it was implemented, and how it worked.
Well, this was an idea that started in the 60s. You remember there was a book, maybe you're too young, called The Population Bomb. And it was, millions of people are going to starve to death. And as a friend of mine who's written about this has said, this was like bell-bottoms and sideburns. This was a craze. Yes. Too many people. And various governments, like in India, they had tried to do, limit births and forcible vasectomies, but China was the perfect laboratory because they were in a rush to get rich fast, and there was no religious precepts against abortion or birth control, and it was a totalitarian regime. So they had this very, very strict policy. People who didn't follow the rules could have their houses torn down, their property taken away, their animals confiscated, and then they started confiscating babies. And this was, because of international adoption, which was very lucrative.
The family that you follow is deep in the countryside where you might not think the government would be as strong or would reach as far, but that wasn't true when it came to the one-child policy. Why not?
Well, the government was everywhere. There were Chinese Communist Party monitors in every village, and the people in the countryside, they were the powerless, without voices, without any political clout, not that you would have political clout in a country like this, and they were vulnerable. And these family planning officials would, sneak into, very, very remote villages, and they would look for baby clothes on clotheslines, or they would talk to nosy neighbors. And the villages where these children were taken were all very remote. One of them we had to hike up a goat path. The one where the twins came from, we had to, walk along a little log bridge, and there's a picture of it in the book, but they were very remote and very vulnerable.
What did the Zhang family that you write about, what do they think of the one-child policy?
Well, this is a funny thing. They're very loyal, patriotic Chinese. They really love the Chinese Communist Party. They feel like it lifted them out of poverty. And so they respected the one-child policy. They believed in the policy. That didn't mean that they were actually going to follow the policy.
Right,
and
yes.
I think, it's like us,
Yeah.
I believe in taxes. I'm not really happy about paying them. I do. And they had, the typical young rural couple, they had two daughters when they very early in their pregnancy. They had already been punished for having the second daughter. And the paternal grandfather was really pushing them to try for a son. The son carries on the family name and conducts rituals at the cemetery, blah, blah, blah. So they pushed them and pushed them and pushed them. And The mom, young mom at the time, hid out actually in a bamboo grove. That's where this comes from, to give birth secretly so nobody would see she was pregnant. People could be, pregnant women were often picked up and forcibly aborted, up to 8-9 months, very brutal, unsanitary conditions. So she went to have her long-awaited son, and boom, 2 more daughters.
Twins.
Yeah.
They said she wasn't looking like she felt so well. They were like, something's wrong with this pregnancy, and it turns out to be twins.
Yeah. She gave birth to one, and then she's like, something is still moving inside. So they were, and you would have thought they'd be horrified, but the father, who's really kind of an unusual rural Chinese man, loved girls.
He could have been a stay-at-home dad.
That's what I said.
Right.
If he lived in Scandinavia, he probably would have been, I'll stay at home and take care of this. He loved girls. He is very gentle, soft-spoken, doesn't smoke, and they really wanted to keep the girls. And he was actually kind of pleased. It was a little bit of a comeuppance to his patriarchal father. And they tried to hide the girls in this kind of awkward ruse. They left one with an aunt and uncle. And that's when these family planning officials actually came in, immobilized the aunt. There were like 10 people who broke into the house, and they took the baby.
How did you first get involved with the Zheng family?
I was a reporter in China from 2007 to 2014, which was actually a relatively open period for journalists. And I was like traipsing through rural China writing this story. And I'm not an adoptive parent myself, but I had a lot of friends who adopted, usually women like myself who were professionals, didn't get pregnant when they were, early in life. They were building their careers. So I was very interested in this, and I had heard these rumors that babies were being snatched. And, I went and I interviewed, I had heard from various Chinese journalists about this village. Chinese journalists were way ahead of me, but they weren't able to report.
Oh, interesting.
Because of censorship. And then I found I heard about this family. I crossed the little river bridge, and I interviewed the mom and the remaining 9-year-old girl. And they told me the whole story about how they had twins and one was taken. And the little 9-year-old girl, who was adorable, said, "I miss my twin sister. I want to play with her, blah, 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 blah." I made a video. And, when I was leaving, the mom said, "Thanks for visiting. Come back and bring our daughter."
Oh.
Anyway.
Wait a minute. What did that do to you emotionally when she said that to you? I mean, I know you're there as a journalist, but when someone says that to you.
I was like, I didn't think that was possible. I was like, okay, yeah, thanks, I'll try, But anyway, I got back to my office in Beijing, and I mean, I have to admit something here. I was kind of procrastinating, just messing around on the computer. And things were much more open on social media at that time. This was 2009. And I found these different forums on Yahoo, actually, for parents who had adopted. And they always posted pictures of their kids, in dancing the Nutcracker, riding ponies, building, enjoying American life. They were very proud of these ridiculously adorable kids. And one family I found had, seemed to have adopted around the same time, the same area. This girl was taken when she was almost 2, so she was older than other adoptees, and I knew what she looked like because I had met her identical twin sister. Oh. And it's complicated what happened next, but I started trying to find the family, and they completely freaked out. Mm-hmm. They cut me off through an intermediary, said, we can't deal with this. They were evangelical Christians in Texas. They had, in fact, started a little NGO because, there was a big movement among evangelicals, adopt the world, save the babies. And, that was it. I really couldn't write anything. Mm-hmm. I couldn't out a 9-year-old as being a stolen child. And I sent what I had to the family in Texas. I contacted the family in China and said, look, your daughter is safe. She's been adopted, and I just don't think you can contact her now. And they were actually understanding. They were happy she was alive. And then that was it till 2017.
Once a child is abducted, do the parents have any recourse on getting the child back?
No. I mean, these people are, not connected. They have no money. They're usually or often illiterate or semi-literate. Often family planning officials, what family planning is a euphemism for the enforcement agency, would ask for money, but they were ridiculous sums that the family couldn't afford. These were very poor people.
So family planning, I mean, they couldn't take the child, but they could take the child.
It
wasn't legal.
It wasn't legal, but it was like a don't ask, don't tell. They needed,
Okay.
they needed the money. And, how it was split between the family planning and the orphanage, I don't know. They had to place ads in newspapers saying we found a baby so-and-so, but most of that information was, fabricated. And, these people were rural villagers. They didn't read these newspapers. Some of them were like legal newspapers. And they generally moved them on about 6 months later.
I want to ask about the preference for boys. What are some of the cultural and economic explanations for why Chinese family might place such emphasis on having a boy?
I think the main one, it has to do with retirement. The tradition is that the boys take care of the parents in their old age and that the girls marry out. It had been a very common cultural thing. So the girl goes to another village, marries, and takes care of her in-laws. So they were like spilled water. But something that's really very important to say here, this was changing. And since there's adoptive parents, no doubt, listening, and adoptees, during the 80s and 90s, there really were a lot of abandoned babies. But by about 2000, there's not an exact cutoff, Chinese were getting a lot richer. And the attitudes towards girls were changing. The girls were starting to work in the factories in southern China. They were making money. They were sending the money back to their parents. And people didn't want to give up their daughters. And there was just such a change in China over that decade. And that's when these babies got abducted. The earlier adoptions, I think, really were abandoned.
What messages were American adoptive parents given about the children?
Well, it was a very, convenient lie is, you're rescuing a baby from the trash heap of China. And it was very comforting to the adoptive parents. I think it was a very destructive narrative for the adoptees, many of whom, still have, deep psychological issues about abandonment. And something else, sorry, I'm talking like a broken record here. I'm saying abandonment, but it's really relinquishment because, some kids were taken violently, like this twin, but some were given up under great duress.
Yeah.
And there was just a continuum of duress. And I think very few of those girls would have been relinquished if not for the one-child policy.
Esther's adopted mom is from Texas. What did she tell you about why she decided to adopt and why she decided to adopt from China?
She was Esther's mother, who is a wonderful person, as I've come to know, wanted to be a missionary as a child. She was very motivated by humanitarian concerns. And she was older. She already had an adult son. Her husband had adult children from a previous marriage. And, she heard a program about babies being thrown out, one in particular about a girl who was thrown down a well because her family wanted a boy. And she's soft-hearted. And so she decided, to save the babies.
It was altruistic on her part.
It was altruistic. And it was an extension of her desire to be a missionary. And so she adopted two girls from China, one a little bit older, and then Feng Feng, who became Esther.
And Esther had a little bit of a harder time sort of melding into the family a little bit.
That's right, because she was almost 2 when she was taken. She was 2.5 when she was adopted, and she could already, speak very coherently and walk, and she was a very precocious kid. And Marcia's husband, who has unfortunately since passed away, said, it almost seems like she had another family.
It's interesting because Esther's Chinese family, as you described, they grew up in rural poverty. They're doing better now. But she grew up middle class in America.
Struggling middle class. They were, I think this is a very typical American story of people who were falling out of the middle class. Her husband got cancer. He had to leave his job. She was taking care of young kids. She retired early. It was just typical. Not quite enough health insurance, not quite enough pension.
Interesting. Gosh, that's interesting. I think about that for a minute. But as you said, when she turned 17, things changed. She was able to meet with her twin.
Yep.
That must have been an incredibly hard decision for her to make.
It was. And, at first, she found out about this whole thing when she was 9 years old, and she was horrified.
Yes.
Like, I have to go back to China. But as she became a teenager, she saw that she looked different from other people. She grew up in a very, very white community in rural Texas, and she started following Chinese fashion bloggers. And at that point, that's when somebody in her family contacted me and said, "Can you help?"
How did you feel about being contacted? Can you help?
It was really out of the blue. This was 2017. It was right
Wow.
after Trump's inauguration. We were, it was full of protests in New York and at the airports. It was kind of a crazy time. But I was like, wow, I never forgot this story. I didn't think I'd write about it. But, of course, I couldn't not help. And as I got sucked into it, I shouldn't say sucked into it because I put myself into it, I realized how much trauma I had caused the family in a way, and I felt obliged to help.
Did you feel like you caused the trauma?
I did.
Why?
I felt like I was writing these stories as a journalist and that I had not thought enough about the psychological, implications. I mean, I was trying to help the Chinese family, but I was also trying to see if I could. I wasn't even trying to write a story at that point. I was just trying to see if I could find her. I like to fool around on the internet. And I don't know. I just got more and more involved. I found Shuangjie. I started sending letters between them. Then it was like text messages. I set up a video chat. And, finally, we all went to China together.
How are you feeling about it now in 2025?
I mean, I feel very good about it. It's not a fairy tale. I think people want to look at this as, separated, trans, united. It's a fairy tale. There's tensions there and issues. We had really hoped that Shuangjie could come to the U.S. the following year, and then that was COVID 2020. And we've talked about it, but it's very difficult for a Chinese person that age to get a visa to the U.S. She doesn't. Because of the political situation, she doesn't have a passport. And, I mean, the twins have found it hard to keep up the intimacy because they don't speak the same language. They're texting, and for all the wonders of technology and the AI interpreters, it's difficult.
That was my conversation with journalist Barbara Demick. Her book is called Daughters of the Bamboo Grove: From China to America, a true story of abduction, adoption, and separated twins. And that is all of it for today. All of it is produced by Kate Hines, Jordan Loff, Simon Close, Zach Goddard-Cohen, El Malik Anderson, Luke Green, and Sasha Linden Cohen. Our interns are Emily and Joey Jerva. Megan Ryan is the head of Live Radio. Our engineers are Juliana Fonda, Jason Isaac, and Amber Bruce. Luscious Jackson does our music. If you missed any segments this week, catch up by listening to our podcast, available on your podcast platform of choice. If you like what you hear, please leave us a great rating. It helps people find the show. I'm Allison Stewart. I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you. I'll meet you back here next time.